Hello, everyone. Happy St. Bridget's Day, and you're all very welcome to What Next? Supporting Change in the Performing Arts. This webinar is part of the Creative Europe programme Centre Stage. Just a few housekeeping things before we begin. The session is being recorded and will be available to watch back on the Theatre Forum and on the Centre Stage websites after the event. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to ask questions throughout the session using the Q&A function below in your Zoom taskbar. We will aim to answer all these questions together at the end. The session is also being closed captioned, and this is available via the CC button in the taskbar or the link in the chat. And now I'm delighted to hand over to our facilitator for this morning's webinar, lecturer and director of Solo Sirens, Jenny MacDonald.
Thank you so much, Katie. Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome here today, and happy St. Bridget's Day here in Ireland. So as Katie said, I'll be facilitating the session, so I'll just let you know what's going to happen. We are going to be sharing some information about the Centre Stage program. We are also sharing clips of a reflective film that was made about the program. And we're using those clips to generate a discussion about inequality, gender inequality, and inequality across sectors of our society. So the films are a springboard to discussion. There will be a chance for Q&A at the end. And we're particularly hoping that this is useful to educators, to people working in third level institutions, as a model of how you might use the film to have discussions with your students. Now, if you don't work at third level, don't worry, you are very welcome, and we hope it'll be a very fruitful discussion for all of us. So we will kick off with Anna Walsh, who is the director of Theatre Forum, and Anna is going to tell us about the Centre Stage program.
Thank you, Jenny, and good morning from Dublin on St. Bridget's Day. Theatre Forum is the Irish partner of the Centre Stage trio. This career development programme aims to contribute to positive change on gender equality at both individual and structural levels for performing artists. And as Jenny has mentioned, it's also co-funded by the Creative Europe programme of the European Union. So going back many, many years now, it seems, how did it all come about? After a successful pilot workshop in Sweden, presented in collaboration with Theatre Forum, the lead partner, and this apologies, no apologies for the English translation of the organisation name, the Administration for Cultural Development in Sweden's Västra Götaland, which essentially is Western Sweden, asked us to continue as the project grew into a bigger Creative Europe one. Our Spanish partner, the Agency in Andalusia for the Cultural Institutions, joined the project group. So this Centre Stage project was just one response to the evidence from each country that women performing artists still earned less, got less funding, were under more time pressure than their male peers, and underrepresented within publicly funded arts organisations. Undoubtedly, Ireland was in that 2019 mix because of Lian Bell's Waking the Feminist work, raising consciousness of bias and inequality in the performing arts and gathering the evidence needed for changes that were urgently needed, in governance, policy and activities. So this is a programme of three parts. There's the core training and coaching programme for artists to develop their communication and artistic leadership skills. 24 artists, and one of whom is Noelle, who's joining us here this morning, 8 each from Sweden, Ireland and Spain, worked with mentors and coaches in preparation for attendance at European showcase and networking events in 2022, a year later than originally planned because of all of the COVID restrictions that kicked in during 2020 and 2021. But after, there's also an online course, and that consists of 13 video lectures with practical exercises that any artist can take entirely at their own pace. It's available in 6 languages and is also free of charge to anyone who wants to pursue the course in their own time. Equally, there's a Centre Stage film which shares reflections on gender equality in the performing arts. That too is available to download and with subtitles in 5 different languages. Both the online course and the film are available to you as educators and as practitioners and arts people working in the arts to explore equality issues with colleagues, students, and practitioners. So did we learn anything along the way? Well, hopefully, yes. The first thing, and maybe one of the most important, is that things don't always go according to plan. So our great hope of having the group go to Inisheer in 2020, 2021 fell apart because of COVID. But I think there were very hugely important lessons along the way. The first might have been that gender equality might look different in different cultures and societies, but its impact is similarly negative. We also found and confirmed that in the performing arts, more and more artists and arts workers work independently or as freelancers. Artists and freelancers have little recourse to the most basic protection to ensure that they are included, treated equally and fairly, or redress if they are not. We hope that our work on pay scales, taking positive EDI actions, and ITI's Safe to Create initiative are some of the ways that we can collectively tackle some of the inequalities that remain. More broadly, I think today more than ever, inequality pervades our sector and possibly our society. In some ways, it's conscious and systemic, and in others, unconscious but insidious. As a membership organisation, Centre Stage, I think and hope, has helped to shape Theatre Forum's approach and also to identify the actions needed for a more inclusive, equal and diverse membership organisation, as well as a performing arts sector. So to finish on St. Bridget's Day, wishing all our artists and panellists the very best for the following discussions.
Thank you so much, Anna. So as Anna mentioned, a reflective film was created. The film has 5 chapters, and we are going to hopefully have time to see clips from 3 of those chapters. So we'll see a clip and then we'll unpack some of the issues raised with our panelists. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our panelists. We have Noelle Brown, and Noelle is an actor, writer, theater maker, and adoption rights activist. And Noelle, you are also a Centre Stage artist. Yes, welcome, Noelle. We have Tatiana Santos, and Tatiana is a socially engaged artist and equity and diversity consultant. Hello, Tatiana. And we have Francesca Lamorja, who is a lecturer and the founder of Mother Tongues. And Mother Tongues promotes multilingualism and intercultural dialogue through the arts. And Tatiana, you work with Mother Tongues as well. Yes, great. So the first chapter that we're going to watch a clip from focuses on access to the arts labor market. So we'll watch this film clip together, and then I'll be asking our panelists some questions based on the film.
Dejan de tener trabajo porque no les escriben personajes para ellas. Y yo creo que eso se va arreglando también un poco, porque también hay dramaturgas y también empiezan... Yo creo que eso va por buen camino, fíjate, porque cada vez que hay más incorporación, que es lo que decía, el momento que se vayan incorporando más, ya va a ser mucho más fácil el dialogar, el que entren, y todo eso va a pasar, y las propias escritoras van a escribir, dices, un papel para Vicky Peña, por Dios, o analizarán. ¿Y qué ha pasado? Pues que Nuria Esper hace el Rey Lear. O sea, es decir, no hay un papel para que Nuria Esper haga, pues el Rey Lear, ¿por qué no? Y Blanca Portillo ha hecho Hamlet. Y Segismundo. Entonces hay una parte que no podemos evitar, y dices, esos grandes papeles, pues a día de hoy, en el siglo XXI, esos grandes papeles también los puede interpretar una buena actriz, ¿no? Haces una y una... Pero es verdad que eso ha faltado porque la propia dramaturgia y literatura no se centraba en la problemática de una mujer de más de 40.
Det som kunde vara med manusen är ju att de flesta klassiker är ju skrivna av män. Så att det handlade om att satsa på nyskrivet. Och min satsning som jag har gjort på nyskrivet under faktiskt 15 år, den innehåller ungefär idag tror jag 105 verk av 180 premiärer som jag har programlagt de här 15 åren. Det blev ju också ett sätt att dels förhålla sig till samtiden, att aktivt satsa på nyskriven dramatik, men också att förändra fördelningen mellan kvinnor och män. För många kvinnor skrev ju också med ett nytt perspektiv och skrev för kvinnor och kvinnor i huvudrollen, i drivande roller. Så att man måste ju tänka att man arbetar framåt, och även när man jobbar med en klassiker så kan man ju liksom titta på klassikern med en viss blick. Det handlar ju inte bara om att räkna huvuden, det är ju också hur man gestaltar kön och hur man ska förhålla sig till det sceniska överenskommelsen.
I think we already know now in 2021 that it's an accepted fact that diversity raises the bar, that it makes artistic programs better, it makes your marketing better, it makes your company culture better, and that's true across all industries, not just the arts. And into the future, that richness and that skill and that enrichment that's happening when you have more diverse artists, more diverse audiences, organisations that take in a wider view of perspectives, that gap is only going to widen. So I think that all organisations, as a real matter of urgency for the quality of their work and the relevance of their work going forward, need to treat diversifying who they're speaking to and who they're working with as a matter of real urgency in order to keep up.
Okay, so Noelle, I think we'll start with you on this one, because the clip opens with a discussion about representation of women in theatre in terms of characters, scripts. Is what we just heard true to your own experience? And is it changing at all? And if so, how, or what's causing change?
I think in terms of roles for women, there's always been in Irish theatre sort of a bookended thing, which is young women, and then there's the old woman in the bed. For me, as a 57-year-old gay woman, there's a whole section in the middle that is still missing. And I think post-pandemic, it has again really been highlighted in terms of roles and playwriting support for funding for playwrights, essentially. We are at the point now where it is emerging again, young people. And you look at all these programs and you look to see yourself represented, and it's not there. I think women in their 50s and 60s are missing. And it's a very vital part of a woman's life. It's a very productive time for playwrights. It's a very productive time for actors. And it seems to be missing. And, societally, women are supposed to disappear within their 50s. There's a bias around it, and that they have nothing to say and their stories aren't interested. And I see very clearly that it's still there, particularly post-pandemic. While there are some supports, there aren't enough. And those stories aren't being told. And I think it's really important that changes. There's programs like the Mavens program, which I'm involved in Dundrum, in the Mill in Dundrum. And it's a fantastic program. And what it does is, it's for playwriting, for women playwrights. But what it does is it doesn't exclude it and, lump together women in their 50s and 60s and go, okay, let's represent women. It's intergenerational. It's 35 plus. And I think that's what needs to happen, because what happened in the 90s in London, where they went women writers and they were put in a corner over here, and that was it. There needs to be more connection between the generations in terms of that, but also to highlight women's stories in their 50s and 60s is really important, because it's a very, very important time in a woman's life. The Royal Exchange in Manchester in 2019 did this thing called Elders Exchange Day for makers and artists. And it was elders and a young company working together to create work. And again, this is something venues in Ireland could do, is bringing the generations together and raising awareness of the stories that are not being told. And I think it's while there have been changes, before the pandemic, I think it really has slipped again now. And when you look, while there are supports, some professional supports, through the Arts Council and through funding organisations, in terms of that age bracket, it's missing. And like, I did a show in the Fringe recently where I played a 57-year-old lesbian. The part was written for me, and she was an activist as well. And it was suddenly waking up to that fact, going, we don't see those stories on stage. Yeah. So while some young playwrights are writing grannies and mammies and interesting parts for women, the women themselves, I don't think their voices are being heard.
Okay, yeah, so we have a kind of an intersecting inequality there, don't we, in terms of age, and some great suggestions in terms of intergenerational work. Really interesting too to hear you say there's been a slip back since the pandemic. So I think we always find this with change, don't we? It's kind of forwards and then back, forwards and then back. So Tatiana and Francesca, and in your work with mother tongues, are you facing similar issues in terms of multicultural representation, multilingual representation, or does it take a different form and therefore need to be addressed in different ways?
Tatiana or Francesca?
Either person can go. Francesca, do you want to start off?
Yeah, just before coming on, I was thinking about language in the specific.
Yeah.
And kind of what we sometimes mean by linguistic diversity, because there's always this kind of duality of the language of the majority being the language that, especially in the context of working on a stage, is the right language to use, or what is maybe perceived as the correct way of speaking, the correct accent, or the more pleasing and the more appealing accent to an audience, maybe, or to your colleagues or people you work with. And I suppose it's something like language is something that we don't often name as being something that makes people different from one another. So it may not be at the head, of issues that people raise, or at the top of the issues that people raise. Well, I think I wasn't chosen for that role because of how I speak, or because of, maybe people might come into this maybe difficult group to penetrate. I'm thinking if you're coming as a second language learner, for example, it means that you haven't been studying or been raised in an Irish context. Then you have to penetrate a new environment, which is hard in itself. I was thinking of, we ourselves, and I'm one of those people who learned English as an adult. I came with a lot of fear on one hand, but also a lot of self-judgment that people didn't necessarily put on me, but that I put on myself, thinking, well, I can't do that because I speak like that, or because I can't speak in a certain way. Or so your language, your culture is part of who you are, but you don't know how open your new world is to who you are. And I think you're quite vulnerable in that position, because you don't know if you're being completely, you're overthinking, you're worrying about it. And because the issue is not discussed, it's very, very difficult to tell. So I often find that some people might come to me in my, for the festival, Mother Tongues Festival, for example, and ask me some questions that make me realize, actually, this artist is thinking that they cannot participate because English is not their first language. Where is this idea coming from? And so that got me really thinking, where is this bias that we all have coming from? Has this person been rejected sometime before? But whenever you try to put a finger on it, I don't see any evidence that is written down, or that is in the papers, or that has been voiced by a group. So it's almost like it is a layer of your identity that sometimes it's very present, it's very core to who you are, and you cannot change it either. I cannot change the way I speak. I cannot change my first language, but I've never heard other people's perceptions. I've never heard the comment. I've never known if I've been excluded because of that. And I'm not speaking of myself, I'm just giving you an example. So it is an issue of language, it's an issue of culture. And going back to what was said in the video about raising the bar, I think that when you're trying to integrate into a new group, into a new society, you often have to give up a part of yourself, or you feel that you should give up a part of yourself. And that is the opposite of raising the bar, because you would like, as a society or as an industry, to be taking in people with all the richness that they bring from their background, from their training, from their lived experience. But often there's a clash there. And where someone has to give up who they are, then you're not raising the bar anymore. You're just telling people to adapt and to conform to a certain way of being, which may seem more acceptable. So these are the thoughts that the videos raised with me from my experience.
Yes, thank you. So now we have other factors in the mix from what you said. We have language, we have culture, we have accent, and also you've spoken there to what happens inside, to the fear, the vulnerability, and the importance of naming and acknowledging these things. I'm going to pick up and go to Tatiana. I'm going to pick up on what you said there about Ruth McGowan's statement about diversity raising the bar. So absolutely, as you say, what we want in a healthy society and a healthy arts culture is that everybody can bring forth their best gifts. And we know, I don't think there's any question about what Ruth says. We know that diversity raises the bar. We know it makes everything richer. But how can we raise the bar on behalf of our work for diversity? How can we make sure that it happens? So Tatiana, in your own work and in your own experience as an artist, what can we be doing to allow the bar to be raised by diversity, to allow people's best gifts to come forth?
Yeah, I think for me, representation is a key word. We often say in mother tongues, and I say it myself in my individual practice, that we cannot be what we cannot see. It's very important that people are able to see themselves on stage, on the TV, advertising, etc. And another thing that we say is that we have to exercise and be able to keep asking, who's missing in this room? When I look around, who's not here? And the next time I want to do a collaboration with an artist, can I think of someone who I haven't been seeing that represents a marginalized group, and maybe approach that person and give people, because I believe that each of us, we have a certain level of privilege, and sometimes we are not aware of it. And even myself as an artist, I could do many collaborations with many people that I know that have been receiving already support. And I always look around and see, oh, maybe that person that I met before, I never saw that person doing anything. I'm a dance artist, so I never see that person performing or teaching. Let me reach out to the person and see if they want to cooperate with me, and then I am not only looking up to where I want to be, but I'm able to look down and give my hand to someone who maybe wants to come with me in my journey as well,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so we all have various levels of privilege, and drawing awareness to that, and then noticing, I think it's a really great question, who is missing? So whatever rooms we find ourselves in, whatever projects we find ourselves on, looking around and saying, who is missing, and who could I reach out to address that? Thank you for that. So thank you all for those reflections. We're going to go to another film clip now, and this one focuses on access to resources and the gender pay gap. So we'll do the same thing. We'll watch the clip together, and then we'll hear some reflections from our panel. Thank you all.
So the gender pay gap is obviously an issue that is all pervasive. It's been in Ireland quite a topic of conversation for a number of years. In fact, up until our joining the EU in 1973, the Irish gender pay gap between men and women was anything up to about 50%. It was a particularly stark figure at the time. So now we know it's between 14 and 16%, but that's still not acceptable. I think really the key thing that organisations and government in general at policy level need to be focusing on is key directives in this area. Reporting is really important. So, what gets measured gets done. So I think organisations really need to be taken to task on why there are gender pay gaps. There's absolutely no reason why women and men shouldn't be paid the same for the same work and the same job. So I think those are the kind of key focus areas that really need to be looked at from a policy perspective.
Jag har fått lägre lön än andra, men jag har varit väldigt påstridig och ställt frågan, vad får den här personen i lön jämfört med mig själv? Men det är ju också en kamp man måste bedriva hela tiden, och jag tycker det är ganska tråkigt Man får göra det fortfarande. Men jag önskar att det skulle finnas en transparens och kanske också att det finns, där skulle jag nog tycka det var bra om man hade någon lag, är väl fel att säga, men någon form av liksom tariffer hur det ska, och inte den som skriker högst och så.
So I think to achieve change, the most important thing is to recognise that the problem is systemic and to address those root causes of inequalities, where they're creeping into your working practices. And if you can address those, and that could be from something like looking at how maternity leave affects people's ability to access salary increments. It could be about routes of access. So are your application materials accessible enough? Are your job descriptions keeping people out in a way that you might not even understand that you're doing? And so I think a real willingness to break the mold, to understand that if you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same results. So actually looking at every single process with fresh eyes and getting outside expertise to help you do that, so that you can change the way that you do things in order to reach different communities and get different results.
Okay, so I think we'll start with you on this one, Tatiana. And we heard one of the speakers in the film say that she asks questions. You know, she says, how much is this person getting paid? How much am I getting paid? And it strikes me watching that can be a very difficult thing to do as an individual artist. How possible have you found it in your own work to ask those kinds of questions? Or do you need, or what kinds of supports do you need from organizations you're working with to make that space possible?
Luckily, I think, I don't know if because I work with women a lot, I think we have the same struggle, right? So everybody who I have been working with are very clear and straightforward about payment. I don't even have to ask. And that helps a lot when you don't have to negotiate, when you don't have to ask. It takes the anxiety when it's the first thing that we're going to be discussing. So those are your working hours. The payment is X and or Z. That helps a lot. But it's not an answer, but maybe is a reflection. It's difficult from my experience as an immigrant as well. In the very beginning, when I started my practice, the amount of times that I worked for free because I didn't feel that I was good enough. So people would ask me to work for free and they would say, oh, it's good for exposure. And I had just arrived in a new country. So if I knew what I know today, like 5 years ago, I wouldn't work for free. And as we mentioned, I think Francesca mentioned that as well, because it's so complex. And as Ruth said in the video, isn't a structure that I was asked to work for free, not only by men, but also by women, you know? So we have to start to have those conversations about it's not all right to ask someone to work for free because they are not from your own country, you know? And of course that comes with time, with conversations, with what we are doing here right now, being honest about it, you know? I don't know if that answers.
It's such an important thing you've raised there. This thing that is often done in the arts about exposure. You want to be seen, you want to work, you know, and it's used in very oppressive ways. So thank you for sharing that in your experience. Yeah. So Francesca, you're running an organization yourself, and what are you trying to bring into the organization's structures that address some of these issues?
Well, we're a very small organization, so we're ourselves under all the pressures, the monthly pressures of making ends meet kind of thing. So definitely knowing the stress around the precarious situation makes me understand what it is like to be an artist who is under precarious situations. We work with artists who not only have family, they have various other pressures with housing and all the other kind of societal and financial issues that are going on. And so I often think about the person who is on that side, who is kind of relying on this income to respond to their own needs and their family's needs. I am aware also as an organization that because of who the size of it and because of how we're funded, we cannot guarantee, for example, things like sponsors for visas. So we have worked with people from outside of Europe. And even though we were willing to give them more security, we're aware that we can't do that. And for me, especially for the kind of work we do, it's kind of a failure in a way, because we know that because of our situation, we're excluding people who don't have a EU passport, which again, or who don't have a secure situation within the European, in the EU. So we think about it, we try to address it, and when what we can, I suppose we follow guidelines on payments. So we look at what is recommended by various resource organizations, and we're transparent about it, and we don't make distinctions. We kind of we have a set kind of a price list, like was mentioned earlier. But there are, I think, issues, for example, maternity leave that was mentioned in the video, and also aspects associated with what is in a job description. I think I myself found the situation of being a lecturer for many years, maybe going from a precarious contract to another. I do find that the arts mirrored that a little bit, in that it's almost taken for granted that it cannot be a safe and permanent situation. And for a woman, this is very difficult because your own life is going through so many changes, and not having security is making it very difficult, and it's making some people leave, of course.
Yes, yeah. So thank you. I mean, you've brought in the awareness that working in the arts is precarious because of other things about the society we live in, family, housing, and particularly citizenship status, that has an absolutely fundamental impact on people's lives, on their capacity to work. And also that as a small organization, and many arts organizations are very small, it's precarious too. It's, you know, it's different to the precarity of an individual artist, but small organizations are in a precarious situation. And Noelle, you're doing both. I mean, you're an individual artist and you have a company. So anything you want to add to these reflections?
I think, well, as a, you know, employing people myself, I mean, I would pay people standard rate. Sometimes if there's a discrepancy in terms of the time that they're involved in the project, whether it's a week or a month or whatever, that would dictate it. But I do think company rates, good company rates, can make a difference and take that out of the equation. But I think more importantly, we need as artists to be more open about what we're being paid. And I certainly see it with younger artists. They're much more open about who's being paid what. They will talk about it in the rehearsal room. And I think my generation are slowly coming to terms with that. You were always afraid to say, and, you know, there was huge gender pay gaps, which an agent of mine used to actively fight on my behalf. But I think we need to be more open about it, because I think that dictates a lot. And sometimes, you know, I would have come into the industry with the fear of, oh, someone will do it for cheaper, so just accept what they offer. But I was, you know, we're reaching a point where we just need to be more open about it, because I was negotiating a contract recently and a friend of mine had already worked for the company, and she said, well, this is what I got. And we would be, you know, of similar age and stuff. So I was able to go in with that knowledge. And it's a huge, you know, my agent was able to go in with that knowledge. But that's a huge bonus when you're coming to negotiating. I think the agents play a huge role in this, in terms of making sure that those pay gaps don't happen based on gender. I think they can play a very, very important role on it, because they're on the inside of negotiating and negotiating contracts.
Great, yeah. So good reminder that there's so many people that are part of our arts ecology, and particularly that we can speak openly about it. Yeah, we can speak openly about these issues and really help one another in that way. So thank you for those reflections, and we're going to move to one more film clip now, and this comes from the chapter of the film that focuses on sexual harassment.
It's really interesting for me that it has rankled male professionals and artists who think they're right on, but aren't. We had a weird situation on Twitter a number of years ago that I was involved in, where an artist was so dismissive of, there was a female writer, artist and writer, who was commenting on the Me Too movement and her experience of it. And it's quite a brave thing that she did, and what she was talking about was that the male artists around her kind of didn't believe her because they didn't see it, and she was inviting them to kind of open their eyes and see it. And this particular male artist in Ireland insisted that because there were women on his team, then there was no there was no problem with the music industry in Ireland, and that no one suffered sexism or anything, and went as far as to say to me on Twitter that of course I haven't, because I'm too strong and no one would dare cross me, which is ridiculous. Of course I weekly suffer from sexism in the music industry, even how I'm talked about in the music industry. So I think the thing for me that rankled was when I and a female reporter pointed out his irony to him. He asked us for proof of where we had experienced sexism, but when a male artist and a male journalist pointed out to them, he thanked them for the education moment, and we both pointed out the same thing. So we've a lot of work to do in Ireland, and people, I think, don't recognise the difference between sexual attacks and sexual inappropriateness and sexism.
Okay, so a lot to unpack in that short clip. If I don't see it, it doesn't exist. It's a pervasive attitude. How do we combat that one? Tatiana, I'm seeing you nodding there, so I might go to you. What do we do with that one?
I think people that know me more, I'm very vocal, and I have been rethinking my behavior, either when I feel comfortable speaking up, even when I don't feel comfortable speaking up. Should I speak up? Because I tend to speak up, and I encourage people to speak up. And I know that we are all different people, and everybody has a different way to deal with conflict, we deal with harassment. But also I observe how sometimes people are afraid to speak up because they think they won't get any support. So for me, it's very, very important that we let women, girls around us, that they will get support, that even if they fear that they won't get a job, that we will talk to 10, 100 people so they can network and have another job if they don't feel comfortable working with a certain company or working with a certain person. That happens more than we think because we don't speak up, because we are afraid, because we want to work, we don't want to be seen as a difficult person to work with, etc., you know. And it's funny how I believe that many of us have been in the situation or witnessed the situation that when the person who is the abuser keep getting loads of jobs, you know, we don't talk about this, you know, the person, it's pretty much like we are, I think the word is connivant. And that annoys me, you know. So I want to make sure that women that work with me, that I'm friends with, that they can count on me to speak up, you know? I think we have to fight that fear of calling, if you prefer calling out or calling in.
Okay, so yeah, we need to speak up, and we need to support people when they do speak up. Again, probably both can be difficult to do, and we're hearing things are repeating now, the fear that we face, the desire to work. Noelle, how can we support each other to speak up more?
Well, I think we can no longer say, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. We can't say that about anything, because clearly it does, and it's been called out so many times. That's not a get out of jail card anymore. I think the onus on people to stand up and speak is a huge pressure. So I think it is about everyone opening their eyes and being vigilant and seeing if there is anything going on. You know, we don't need to be told sometimes. In the arts, we work in very close environments a lot of the time. It's a very intense room that you're in. It's a rehearsal room. You notice everything. I mean, you'd want to be blind. And honestly, in that's no disrespect to anybody with sight problems, but you are aware, you're hyper aware. I mean, that's your job as an actor. You know, you are aware of what's going on around you. You're aware of people, situations. So I don't think we need to support each other. I mean, that's the whole point. When you're an actor working in a room, you are a company of people. Sometimes it's a large company, sometimes a small company, but you are aware of what's going on. And I think it's looking out for each other is what the most important thing, and not being a bystander or go, well, I didn't see it, nothing's happening. Just being that it isn't always the person that has to call it out, that someone else can go, that's inappropriate, that's made that actor feel uncomfortable, please don't do that. I think that's where the emphasis should be now. We have called it out. We are calling it out after years and years and years. And it's very triggering. It's very hard to be in that position, to have to call things out, to be disbelieved or dismissed. So I think it's up to people in around those situations to be super vigilant and ultimately support people. And if there's training to be put in place for that, to show people how to not be a bystander, I think that is hugely important moving forward. We've had the calling out, we have the evidence. Let us now build structures around that to prevent it from happening and to put support in place.
Yeah. So that call to collective responsibility. It's not on individuals anymore. And Francesca, how can small organizations then be supported to build these structures of safety with all the stresses we've spoken about that small organizations also face?
Well, my thought, just even around what Noelle was just saying now, is around the many organizations that are now writing their EDI policy, which is part and parcel of their operations. And I suppose every organization is thinking about gender inequality and inequality at various different levels, whether it's gender, but it's also pay, and it's also kind of cultural diversity and so on and so forth. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is, okay, how can I implement this? How can I put it into practice? And like Noelle was saying, yes, we're very aware of some very clear problems that are there that may not be spoken about, or that might end up being the problem of one person who is not supported more globally. So if an organization is putting together a plan to implement their EDI policy, I think it is very important to have something that looks like training, for example. I want to use the word training in a very broad way, an awareness piece, because sometimes issues that I've seen, for example, in the Me Too movement or in the examples of sexism, I may see them, but I don't know what language to use around them, because they are complex and they are a gray area sometimes. So there's a very broad range of problems that we need to solve. So I think developing this awareness at the level of the staff, at the level of anybody who works in the organization, whether that's someone who's making decisions about what's being shown, to somebody who is painting the backdrop, to someone who is doing the tickets. You know, everybody who is making, who is creating this workplace has to have this awareness so that we all use the same language as well. And it's easier for a so-called bystander to be a bystander if you know how to call things and how to name things and how to call them out as well. So I think it's a broader like openness again. It's again about calling things what they are and recognizing them as a problem and saying this organization has it in their constitution, it's got it in their policy that they're not going to accept it. So for a young person, even maybe, you know, a young person or new person who's penetrating this world, where they're like, well, who am I to now, as a new person, calling out something? There is something written down that they can hold on to. And it's something that the person believes in and the organization has stated that they believe in. So it's a support that is more ingrained in the operation of the organization.
Yeah, thank you. So the power of a written policy that comes with training, that comes with awareness. And we're going to hear about an example of that now. We're going to hear from Niamh O'Donnell, who is the director of Irish Theatre Institute, and she's going to talk to us about the Safe to Create program. And after that, we'll have a chance for questions and answers with the panelists and with Niamh. So welcome, Niamh.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you to Theatre Forum and all of the panelists for an amazing discussion, and because so much of it touches on what I'm going to talk to you now about. So, hello, my name is Niamh O'Donnell. I am the director of Irish Theatre Institute, and I want to talk to you about Safe to Create, which is a Dignity at Work programme for the arts. I'm going to talk about our code of behaviour and other supports that we have and plans and what they can do to support artists and all of us working in the sector. So on the next slide, you'll see that this is just an outline. The programme is funded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media, which I will refer to as the Department of Arts from now on, because that is a mouthful. And what we're trying to do is we're looking to ensure safe and respectful working conditions for everyone working in the arts across disciplines, no matter their role. So our strategic intent is to transform the sector for the better. So the programme is being delivered by us, the team here in Irish Theatre Institute, in partnership with the Arts Council and Screen Ireland and Minding Creative Minds. And we also have a range of specialists working with us and consultants and advisors like Alwyn Dole, Dr. Ciara Murphy, Annette Nugent, and Dr. Louise Crowley and Emily Conway, ensuring that every plan that we're coming up with is well thought through and also abiding by best practice. So on the next slide, you'll see we have a number of supports that we launched in October, but first it's really important for me to just talk briefly about where this all started. So it started with the lovely Lian Bell calling and starting Waking the Feminists. It started from the global revelations of abuses of power in the Me Too, with the Me Too movement. And the Department of Arts at that point tasked ITI with the job of looking at the theatre sector specifically. We ran a programme which consisted of meetings and training programs and establishing an initial code of behaviour. And then again, it's really important to acknowledge the amazing work of brave independent artists who started to call out and start up groups like Fair Play and Misha Fosta and Safe Arts of Ireland, which covered all disciplines of music, literature, poetry, traditional music, etc. And so then in 2021, Irish Theatre Institute led the first dedicated study analysing dignity at work, and it was called Speak Up, A Call for Change. And there were a number of recommendations in that report. And the Minister, Catherine Martin, announced a suite of measures to address the things that were identified in the report. And I just want to give some of those statistics. The report the findings were really stark. 53% of the people who responded had witnessed a dignity at work issue, and 51 had experienced bullying. So over half of the people had experienced harmful behavior, 43% humiliation. And then one of the really difficult things was that 36% didn't feel comfortable asking for help, and 35% were unaware that there were supports available for them. So now we have Safe to Create, and we have branded to try to take the onus. I mean, our panelists have all mentioned it, speaking up and doing something, but that onus of that has always landed on the people who are most vulnerable in our sector. And I don't mean that they're like vulnerable, but in relation to employment and working, they are, because of the complexity of how the sector is structured. So we're taking the onus off individuals, and we're placing more responsibility on organizations and employers. So again, as mentioned, I think by Ruth in one of the videos, we know that the issues we're talking about and we're trying to tackle are systemic in society. But actually what we want now is leadership. Like for the arts, so often artists and the arts sector lead the way in relation to social change, and we're saying the time is now. We have to draw a line, and we have to stop accepting open secrets and stop accepting the normalization of harmful behavior and say it's time to make it better. So on the next slide, you'll see who all of the partners are. And one of the most important things about the working group that we have and the structure that we have is accountability is important. So the Arts Council and Screen Ireland and the Department of Arts, as funders of and of so much of the sector, are now insisting that Safe to Create, our training and our code of behaviour, is a special condition of funding. So finally, we're in a position where accountability is real. So on the 5th of October, we launched a resource-rich website, which has key information, toolkits and templates, which I'll talk about a little later. Minding Creative Minds have launched a 24-hour counselling service. We've developed a range of training programmes, partnering with a range of people like The Wheel, the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, and Screen Ireland. And we've written a code of behaviour developed to enable organisations to create safe workspaces. And we are out on the road with that. I'll talk about dates later on in this presentation. And in development very soon to be launched, we will have an anonymous reporting facility. It's a tool. It's called Report to Support, and it will be on our website. And this is a tool where artists and arts workers can completely anonymously report instances of bullying, harassment, and sexual harassment. And what that will do is give us historical, but also real-time information, and protecting those that are reporting so that we are able to design and implement supports across the country where they're most needed and in the areas that they're most needed. And we're also going to run a new batch of research in 2023 this year, as well as in 2025, which will examine the prevalence and also the impact of Safe to Create. And I mean, it's important also to mention that we are reviewing the methodology to ensure that the intersectionality of disability, demographics, and ethnicity are covered in this next step of research, as we felt it was slightly lacking in the last. And then the next slide. We have kept the website as clear as possible. And I think a number of the panelists have already said that it's really difficult sometimes for people to recognize behaviors. So we have literally structured that way, recognizing behaviors, step to takes, resources available, artists and art workers. And then on the next slide, you'll see we've also done the same for organizations, making sure that they can recognize behaviors within their own structures and then what steps they need to be taking. And like a lot of artists have said to us that that they don't see themselves, they don't understand. So we have an amazing range of frequently asked questions. One of the biggest supports that we've launched is Minding Creative Minds, working with Spectrum Life. They have a 24/7 wellbeing program where there is confidential one-on-one counselling, 12 sessions for any artist's art worker who has an issue. And it can be that you may not have directly experienced it, but that in fact you've witnessed it, and you can ring and get that. And you can also have one free legal advice session. And then on to the next slide, you can see it's really at times possibly too dense, in that we have a huge amount of information available. We have, as I said, the frequently asked questions. We also have templates and toolkits and resources. So we have a sample staff handbook. We have 4 contracts supplied by Theatre Forum, 1 for a performer, a sound designer, and 2 different kinds of venue contracts. We have toolkits, harassment toolkits by Amplify Women, and the Equality and Diversity from the Arts Council. Both were prepared by Alwyn Daw, and also the WAM Employers Toolkit, which is all around disability information. We have example policies from the best that we could find around the country. We've legislation, so you understand how you're being contracted and what your rights are in the different kinds of contracts you can be given. And as I said, training. So we have devised 3 training programs: tackling bullying and harassment in the workplace, identifying unconscious bias, and bystander training. Again, as Noelle and Tatiana and Francesca have mentioned, bystander training being really key about how do we stop things right at the start, how do we prevent things from happening, and then, or at least assist in dealing with when something happens and prevent it from escalating. And they've been devised with Screen Ireland. They are going to be a special condition of Arts Council funding, that every staff member or team member has completed them. They are self-led, they are free, and they're online. So they're very easy to do. I'm not saying they're very easy to pass. They're also certified, and the cert will be for 3 years. And then on the next slide, Katie, thank you, we have a code of behaviour. And this is for everyone. It's for employees, workers, trainees, interns, students, and all employers are implied or expected to have and use the code, but also all employees are expected to abide by it. And as I mentioned before, in the sector, we can have organizations of all sorts of different sizes, but we can also have individuals employing people. So we have tried to design everything, even though we know we have a lot more to do, so that we have as much for as many different kinds of people in as many different kinds of situations as possible. So it is for everyone. It's also not a box ticking exercise. The code has to be as an agenda item on the board at a board meeting. It has to be discussed and adopted by the board. Every team member must do the training, and any new team member, freelance, part-time, 1 week, 1 day, should receive the code of behaviour, should understand how they're protected in their workplace. We also have a trust statement that should be read at the start of any workshop or rehearsal room. So this is all about making sure that we all engage in the best way we can to protect everyone. So on the next slide, we have a couple of asks of everyone. Obviously, the first is that we adopt the code and that everybody does throughout your organization. And there are steps which are written on the website as to how to do that. We ask everyone to complete the online training. It really is incredibly informative. So addressing unconscious bias, the tackling bullying, and active bystander. We will be going out with in-person bystander training around the country, all of which is free, and also running intimacy training. So all of these workshops will be across the country and free. And then on the next slide, our last ask is that you show public support. We need to stand together, and we're looking for you to advocate for best practice. So display posters, follow us on social media, like, share, and amplify our message. Sign up to our email newsletter so we can keep you informed. And if you do want to attend any workshop, we have a number coming up. We in Waterford on the 8th, in Dublin on the 9th. We in fact have 2 in Dublin. The first is specifically for artists with disability, and then in Kilkenny and Limerick. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Niamh. It's really inspiring to hear that example of structural change and collective change. And as you said, it draws on so many things that we've discussed in this session. So we do have a few minutes now. If anyone wants to ask a question, there's a Q&A function, as Katie said at the beginning. So it's a matter of typing the question into the Q&A, and I will read it out. So questions for Niamh or any of the panelists. I'll give you a moment to let all that information filter in. And also to say that we've compiled a resource sheet, so with further readings and resources from this session, and that will be available on the Theatre Forum website, as will the reflective film. So do feel that you can go back to those resources. Irma has just put the resource link there. And I'm seeing a question coming in now, so I'll just go into this. So the question is there a possibility of offering an honorarium for independent arts workers, non-salaried, who wish to take time to fully commit to this training? So that's a question for Niamh. And there's some further reflections on the question, but I'm going to hold there first, Niamh.
Okay, so absolutely, that is something that has come up at all of our different Codes on the Roads when we've been talking with people. So obviously the sector is really diverse in relation to how people are employed or how they work. So we have put a call that if you hire somebody on an ongoing basis, you should, cover their time for the training, but then also acknowledging that also, if you've done the training in, if you're working as an extra in a film, you're unlikely to be paid for that time, but it might benefit you to get work if you were to have completed the training yourself. In relation to other training programs that we're rolling out, we are looking at bursaries if people have to travel, so that is something we're looking at, and we're also looking at scholarships for other training programs as well. So it is in the mix, yes.
Great, thank you, Niamh. And I'll just read a few of the other comments that came with questions. So just a note that it's important to raise the discussion of pay scales for independent artists as they age, rather than having blanket company rates for all. And also a note to campaign to add a family status box to funding applications. And that's about gathering data on who is and isn't in the room, particularly for mothers in the arts. So some interesting notes and reflections there. And so we have a moment for another question if there is one. And if there isn't, I'll begin wrapping. So to say a huge thanks to Niamh, Noelle, Francesca, and Tatiana for all of your reflections, your experience, your wisdom and contributions. Thank you very much as well to Anna and to Katie and to Irma. Katie and Irma have been mainly behind the scenes, but we all know backstage is a very important place. So thank you to Theatre Forum for organizing this seminar. Irma's just put up the link to the film, so do go on to the film. Is about 31 minutes long. Do go on to look at the film. Do get in touch with Theatre Forum if you have further questions about how to use the film in your own contexts. And thank you all so much for being here. We hope it's been inspiring for you, and we hope you continue the conversations. Everyone who's watching and everyone who's been on the webinar, continuing the conversations and continuing this impetus that we have to create change. So finally, then, thank you also to the artists and the European partners who were involved in the Center Stage program. And I'll just look to Anna if I've forgotten anyone important. Thank you to Andrew, who's been doing our captions. Anna, you're giving the nod that, okay, we're well thanked.
No, thank you, Jenny.
Great. Thank you all. An inspiring morning, and let's keep going. So speaking up, speaking out, and supporting one another. Thanks for being here.